going on here. When we are in those situations of doubt, the idea, what is the opposite of that? The opposite of that is a calmness, a peace. Here you'll see that again, Amir al-Mu'mineen talks about the peace that we're discussing. So the opposite of shak. So in a sense, we realize that angels don't have doubt, but it's because Allah has immunized them. So therefore, we beseech him and we seek for him refuge from doubts. So that becomes important to always connect with Allah. And therefore, we see that every moment in our life where we have the opportunity, or I should say the reason, we're given a motivation to connect with Allah right away. Although we should be connected all the time, but we are reminded. These are constant reminders for us. So therefore, a difficulty comes. We are reminded to connect with Allah. Doubt comes, shak comes. We are reminded to connect with Allah. So these little whisperings in a way are there to remind us. If Allah has allowed Iblis and his offspring to whisper doubts in our mind, it has given us an opportunity to call for him. So we realize that even in this is mercy and love, and in this is an invitation to call to me, ad'uni, ask me, and I will reply. But maybe we would not be asking him unless we were facing all these problems. And the idea of all these problems needs to be understood by us, so we have to realize. So when are we in doubt? And do we know we are in doubt? And jab hum shak kar rahe hain, are we thinking that I am in doubt? Or have we accepted this doubt to be the truth? There are many times where it is a matter of transcending a doubt into a fact. In our mind, we can do that. And when we're talking to people, giving the benefit of doubt, husn-e-zan, right? So someone says something, it sounded insulting, but we give them the benefit of the doubt. We are not sure if this was right or wrong, and we're developing doubts within us. And so now what we do is we accept it as fact. Someone else puts a doubt in my mind, it becomes a fact. When does doubt turn into reality? And by reality, I mean our perception. We are perceiving doubt, we are perceiving reality, and our perception will determine which is which. So therefore, one can see the holiest messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam from head to toe in front of us, speaking with that magnificent voice, those words of wisdom, the beautiful countenance, that amazing persona, that holiness, that nur, that light, and yet even then doubt it. So even when the ultimate reality is being accepted by our senses, we can doubt. So therefore, the idea of reality, shak, reality is haq, truth, and then doubt. It is within our mind to determine that. But how can we protect ourselves from turning that which is doubt, perceiving it as reality, and perceiving reality with doubt? Well, that is, of course, again, the help from Allah. So therefore, we see that we need his immunization. So we pray to him, oh Allah, immunize us against the waviness of doubts as you have immunized the angels. And that, of course, is it possible? Is it possible for us to acquire the qualities that the angels have? We already have those qualities. And we know, my elders know better than me, and my youngers too, that, one way we look at it, according to a narration, is that there are two things, intellect and desire. The narration says that these two things have been put into the human being. The angels and jinn as well, intellect and desire, humans and jinn, ins and jinn. That's why they are often addressed together in the Quran. They both have intellect and desire. However, in the angels, we know, as we saw from the incident of Harut Marut, they don't have desire, rather they have intellect. And we see the animals, they don't have the intellect that we have. They have their own form of intellect, but they do not have the intellect that we have, and they are mostly governed by desire. Now, even animal desire is different from our desire. An animal desire is usually related to basic bodily needs. Animals are hungry, they eat, they are tired, they sleep, when they want to, they hunt. They are doing these things. However, we can take our intellect and our desire and magnify them. So when we magnify our desire, we become worse than animals. And so therefore the Quran says about them that they are worse than animals. They are animals? No, they are even worse. Why? Because animal desire has a limit, and it's according to need. Our desire can go beyond need. And so therefore that desire, that tells you that when intellect is connected with desire, then that intellect, it can be used or not used. And when it's not used, then the desire becomes magnified. At the same time, when that intellect is used, the intellect becomes magnified. So therefore, when we are using our intellect and we are basing our actions on aql, we magnify our aql and go above the angels. However, if we magnify our desires, we get worse than the animals. So we were not destined for a creature that would be balanced in intellect and desire. We were destined as a creature, a creation that would choose intellect or choose desire. And every moment of our life, that is what we are doing. The decision we are making at the forks and divisions of our life in the decision tree that determines our future fate and destinies, so to speak, is partly determined by us in the choices we make throughout the day with every breath. And at every moment, are we using intellect or desire? These are things, of course, you know better than me, and these are not new things. We talk about them, but when we relate it to the angels, we realize that there has been shown to us a model that we can ascend and rise above. Consequently, no one among them goes astray from the path of his will. So therefore, they are now in tune with his will. And his will is his irada, and his irada, his will is manifested. And whatever his will is immediately comes into manifestation. Our will is manifested in either through trying to go against his will, so therefore we see our will, or perhaps taking our will and sacrificing it and mixing it with his will. And Amir al-Mu'mineen says that I have recognized Allah through the unfulfillment of the will of creation. So when we look at creation and it has its will, then we look at him. Sometimes it is translated as "Maine Allah ko pehchana apne iradon ko ke tootne se." But we have to realize that Amir al-Mu'mineen, as-salatu wassalamu alayhi, being the embodiment of the irada of Allah, is the irada of Allah. There is no conflict between Amir al-Mu'mineen's will and Allah's will. It is the one. When Allah manifests his will, that is what we see. We see Ali ibn Abi Talib, we see the Masumin, as-salatu wassalamu alayhim. So therefore, when we're talking about this quote, Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying that when you look at the people and you see their desires and their will not being fulfilled, that is when you realize, because will is a powerful thing. And, you know, people talk about this will in non-religious terms. You know, some people, motivational speaker type, will talk about this in terms of will is, you know, I forget the term they use for it, but something to do with the universe. The universe will give you what you want, and you just have to will it, and will it with positivity and imagine it. That is how powerful our will is. Because our will is linked to our imagination, and when it manifests, we create many things. But the question is, where does our will come in, and where does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will come in? So the understanding of our desires and our will and what we want is so important. But to put it right and sacrifice it for Allah's will, this is where we succeed. So to do that, we have to first of all not have shak. So Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying, consequently, they don't deviate from his will. That means if we are fulfilling our desire, if I'm fulfilling my desires, I'm having doubt in him. If I am ignoring what he has wanted me to do and I am just doing what I want to do, even though I know what he wants, I'm actually still in doubt. So every sin is a sign, a symptom of a disease, and the disease is doubt. So doubt becomes a very powerful disease within us, far more dangerous than any other disease, because this corrupts the soul. So he has helped them with the benefits of succor, which means that in hardships, in trials, and tests, he has given them help. So that means that nusrat of Allah is coming to the angels. And can we receive that help as well? Certainly. And if we receive that help, what happens? Our hearts get covered with humility and peace. Now, peace here, sukoon, sakina, is the word that's used in the Arabic. If we look at the text that Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu wassalamu alayhi has been quoted to have said. So therefore, sakina, sukoon, and and he is the one who وهو الذي أنزل السكينة في قلوب المؤمنين. So he is the one who anzala, he descends sukoon. So sukoon is coming from him. That means it comes from him to us inside, and then we feel it inside. So we know that peace is found on the inside, but first it needs to come from there. Then it will cause us to feel that sukoon and that peace. And how is that happening? That is happening when we recognize that he is the one that helps, nusrat. So he is benefiting them, and it is powerful. Sometimes we don't realize the power of these words, and the power of the words is said with faith. So therefore, we could be saying one dua 1 year of our life, and then many years later, we could be saying the same dua with the same words, having a much more powerful effect. And why is that? Because now perhaps our marifa is more, our connection with Allah is more, our spirituality is more. And so that idea of taking these words, sometimes we think that they need to be very long duas. There is a certain, I feel that myself. I feel that if I'm wanting to ask something that is, I know, a great asking compared to what I usually get, maybe I want to recite Dua Joshan Kabir, and that is great. Absolutely. Those duas are highly recommended, long ones with lots of ism and ism azam and so on. However, there's also power in the simplest statement. There's also power in one sentence. And the famous incident where, and we see this in Tafsir Imam Hassan Askari salatu wassalamu alayhi Allahumma salli Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allama Majlisi has quoted this Hayatul Qulub, and it is about when the Arsh was made. And when the Arsh was made, we know that upon that was put the Kursi, and so holding up the Kursi with 4 legs, a 4-legged structure, that 4 pillars that needed to be held up. And that means it was to be suspended where it was. Now, Allah uses forces of nature. He creates laws of nature, and those apply to things, which means that things are being held up by what we call gravity, for example, or, laws of motion. But how much of that is actually angel? And so what does Allah mean by angel? And when he describes, maybe gravity itself is an angelic force, as in from the perspective of original creation. We observe it as a law of nature. So these things, for example, we observe that the human being that is in the mother's womb has a structure that is based upon DNA. So we understand the laws of science and DNA and the laws of inheritance. And therefore, we know that when that DNA comes in, it's going to be a program for the basic structure, and we'll end up looking like our ancestors, or parents, grandparents, etc. We'll end up taking some qualities similar. Why? Because of that DNA. But what does the Quran say, or what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? What do the narrations say? That he is the one who draws the face. He draws the face of the baby in the mother's womb. So what we're seeing is science, and we're observing, and through that we are observing how the mechanism and how it's happening. But what is Allah saying about it? Now, this becomes an oversimplification for some people. This becomes that's just kind of, science is giving us the mechanism by mechanism at the molecular level how this is happening, and religion or the holy book or narrations are saying that, it's an angel doing it. How does that make sense? Because what happens is we immediately imagine an angel shrinks, still looks like a human with wings, and comes in and starts painting. And then that seems maybe unrealistic compared to we see DNA and how protein synthesis occurs and so on. But even when you look at the cellular level, and at the cellular level, we can talk about for hours how proteins are made and how physical structure is made. But even after we do that, talk about it for years, our lifetime. There's so much knowledge we have gained as human beings collectively in science about this. But even then, we don't understand the basics. As in, sure, DNA gets transcribed by structures in the cell that will read the DNA, and based on that, they will make proteins that will make our physical structure and so on. But why does that happen? You see, when we ask, why does this happen? And why does that happen? And why does that happen? We eventually reach a point. So sure, we can be very scientific and very knowledgeable. And we can say, well, okay, so I have this face. Why do you have this face? Well, because it was made this way. Why was it made this way? At the cellular level, the ribosomes in my cell were reading the DNA. And the ribosomes are protein factories in your cell that read DNA and make the protein. So why did they do that? Well, because the DNA was photocopied into a different chemical form that came out of your center of your cell nucleus and went flying to the ribosome, and the ribosome read it like an email being sent as instructions. So why did the DNA send that? Well, the DNA sent that because, exactly, we will reach a point where we say, I don't know. I don't know why it got there. We'll say that the earth is, the universe is spreading, and therefore it had a center. If it's expanding, it has a center. If it has a center, that's the point where it started. It has an origin. If it has an origin, it came from somewhere. If it came from somewhere, how did it come? Well, there was a big explosion. How did that explosion happen? Well, there was nuclear fission. Well, how did that happen? Well, there was a nucleus. Where did that come from? You see, eventually we reach a point where we say, yeah, we are still trying to figure that out. And we might figure out more and more and more. But what Allah is calling an angel is that beginning mechanism. So therefore, when we are saying that, for example, we look at, for example, creation, or we look at anything, we see that there needs to be some kind of mechanism. There's an intermediary, and that's where we have reached a point now. And we said last week that a lot of science is trying to prove something from nothing. Something from nothing. That means, what is that mechanism? Because if science can prove there's something from nothing, then we can try and prove that, well, see, there's a mechanism for it. That's how it was created. It wasn't God. There's no creator. This is how it happened. But then that'll cause another question. It's infinite. Even if we can somehow figure that out, then the question will come to, then how did that happen? It's infinite. And eventually we need to reach some source. And that source is him. And therefore, how is something going to come from nothing? Well, this is where Masumin come in. So Masumin are our answer for that. How is something created from nothing? It's created by kun fayakun. And that means that there is going to be an intermediary, and that is Masumin. So if Amirul Mu'mineen says that I am the master of kun, I am the fa between kun and fayakun, we understand that he is telling us this, I'm the intermediary for bringing things from something into nothing into something. So when Allah first manifested his will of creation, it was through the converter of nothing into something. That converter of nothing into something, that is what we're talking about. We're talking about the Masumin, the nur of the Masumin. And so therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he does nusrat. So how do we get his help? Well, we get his help by recognizing his help. He is always telling us, he is commanding us to be humble, to recognize the intermediary. That is what you will see over here with the angels as well. He has, and then we will have peace in our hearts. So how do we recognize that? We have to recognize his nusrat. What is his nusrat? His nusrat is Sultan al-Nasira. What is Sultan al-Nasira? Chapter 17, verse 80. وَاجْعَلْنِي مِن لَدُنْكَ سُلْطَانًا نَصِيرًا. He commands his holiest messenger, ask me for the Sultan and Nasira. If he is telling his beloved holiest messenger, who is also the Nusrat of Allah, if he is telling him, ask for the Sultan and Nasira, that is a lesson for us. It is a lesson for us. And this verse is revealed at that beautiful time when the Makkah has been conquered. And now the idols are to be broken in the Kaaba. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ doesn't go in alone, but goes in with Amir al-Mu'mineen. And therefore, to purify the Kaaba, which is the house of Allah, with the holiest messenger of Allah, will not happen until he calls for the Sultan and Nasira. It is a message to all humankind that within your heart, that is the Baitullah. This is your qalb. And even within your qalb, you have idols. There's 360 in Baitullah at that time. In my heart, I could have 3,600,000 idols. Who knows how many idols I have? Everything that interferes with my connection with Allah is an idol. Everything that takes me away from following and obeying Allah is an idol. My desires are my idol. I become my own idol and worship myself when I accept my will and I ignore the will of Allah. How many idols do I have around me that I have to break? It is a matter of recognizing that they are idols and realizing they have to be broken. And when they are broken, then we clean our heart. And when we clean our heart, then we will see Amir al-Mu'mineen entering into this. So therefore, we need to do that. That means that Baitullah does not have, does not become the spiritual house of Allah and the Qibla properly. Well, it was the Qibla before that even, but it is not cleansed of those idols until Amir al-Mu'mineen comes. Therefore, Ya Ali Madad. Ya Ali Madad is calling upon the Sultan and Nasira. This is not something that we say because we are just blind lovers who like our favorite football team. Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Masumeen are not our team. Where, in Toronto, these poor Toronto fans whose teams usually get kicked out and don't make it to the finals. No disrespect to Toronto, but I'm not into sports, so I often end up saying things that will offend fans, sorry about that. But I do like sport, but I just like playing them, or I like, exercising, or maybe if somebody I know is playing a sport, that's different. I don't have any connection with a team from my city simply because, but anyway, that's a different story. But the point is that when we are, talking about a city team, it's in our psychology to relate to them because they're from our city. And so therefore we become one with them. And then now we are fans, and now everything they do is good. We do not apply that philosophy to the Masumeen. It is not that, oh, look, this is our team, and other sects of Islam, this is your team. These people are on your team, these people are on our team. And when we're looking at these two people on different teams, we say, well, whatever they do is right. It's not that. However, what it is the Quran. We're following what the Quran says. We're following what the Holy Prophet said. We are basically, following the Sunnah. So this becomes Sunnis. So we are the ultimate Sunnis because we follow the Sunnah. And the Sunnah is what? The Sunnah is ask for Sultan and Nasira. Why did he not say ask me? Why did he not say it in a way that only Tawheed would be represented? But he says Sultan and Nasira, ask me for this and ask from me and I will send you. So therefore, and then it comes. And the next verse says, وَجَاءَ الْحَقَّ, and then it came. So Ja al-Haq is Sultan and Nasira. Because when he came, Allah does not come. Allah is not going to come. I was listening to a video by a Sunni scholar, and he was talking about heaven. And he was talking about heaven. He was talking about the ultimate peak of heaven. And the ultimate peak of heaven, as the Quran says, we will see our Rabb. We will see our Rabb in all of his glory. Allahu Akbar. And when it is said that, and then, and he's so happy that we're finally going to see Allah. Allahu Akbar. So much emphasis has been given that he cannot be seen. And yet we think that there's going to be a point where we reach where we will see him. So it needs to be realized that we will see something, but what we will see is going to be as close as we will get to seeing Allah. And what will we see in heaven that will represent the Rabb? That is the 14 Masumeen. That is what we are going to see. So how blessed is someone who knows they will not see Allah, because Allah cannot be seen. We have not, that is another false idol. So what do we need to do? Ya Ali Madad. That is what breaks the idols within. He has fixed for them. And how does he do it? How do we call for help? This is how we call for help. It says that he has opened the doors of submission to his glories. We must submit to his glory. And then we say, Ya Ali Madad. How do we submit to his glory? He has fixed for them bright minarets, bright upstanding light that are signs of his oneness. There are minarets that are signs of his oneness. Minarets is plural. Amir al-Mu'mineen says there are plurality that are signs of his oneness. That is, in a way, it seems contradictory almost. How is it that you have plurality to explain his oneness? But plurality is truly what explains oneness. Why? Because when you look at opposites, you understand them better. So we know there is darkness, there is light, but we understand them better when we compare. And therefore, we understand plurality and oneness when we compare. Plurality here is referring to the 14 Masumeen. He has fixed for them bright minarets as signs of his oneness. This is something that the Quran points to. The beautiful verses in Surah Al-Rahman, an incredible surah, so magnificent and so different and begging so many questions, so many times. After everything, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءٍ, you know, the repetition of a verse again and again is an incredible question. It is begging the question in our mind, why is Allah repeating this and repeating this? And when you look here, you'll see, you know, مَرَجَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ يَلْتَقِيَانِ, one of my favorite verses. And so here he released the two seas meeting. And, you know, when we look at many explanations of this, if you Google it, you'll see that, of course, they'll show you the 7 seas that meet and don't mix. They'll show you different bodies of water where the mineral content and the salt content is a little different. So there's more of a certain chemical on this side versus this side, and we're seeing a difference in the reflection of light. And the idea is that they don't mix. And in a sense, they don't, because, you know, you have majority of chemical different from the other side. However, it's not that they don't mix. There is some mixing. There is some mixing, because H2O, some will go here, some will go there. So that is not the true reflection of this verse. Maraj al-Bahraini yaltaqiyan, according to our tafasir, the Shia tafasir, is the meeting of two bodies of water, which are two nur. And they are, of course, Amir al-Mu'mineen salatu wassalamu alayhi and Bibi Fatima al-Zahra salamullah alayha, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, the two oceans of nur, the ones that Allah calls Bahrain. And you see that when he calls them Bahrain, he has made them equal. That Allah, who does not, who when, you know, you talk about in Arabic, when you talk about male and female, they are separated. When you talk about Zoj and Zoja, they are separated. When you are discussing them in Arabic, you will say Zoj first and then Zoja. And what this does is this gives one, you know, a priority or the primary place, because the name is mentioned first. And so when you're putting two things separately, then there is an indication that maybe one is superior to another. One has maybe more rights, or one is going to listen more to the other. You distinguish them, you put a hierarchy. Here that has not happened. Marajul Bahrain, by saying that that ocean of Nur, which is Ali, is the same ocean of Nur, which is Fatima, is saying that here is the ocean of Ilm, here is the ocean of Ilm, here is the ocean of Hilm, the ocean of Hilm, the ocean of Qudrat, the ocean of Qudrat. They are both oceans. They are both the Iradatullah. And that is why the famous narration, "Lawla Aliyun lam takun kufuli Fatima." If there was not Ali, there would be no kufu. This is the Maraj al-Bahrain. But coming to the point that I wanted to make, "Yakhruju minhuma lu'lu wal marjan." This is Imam Hassan, and this is Imam Hussein, salatu wassalamu alayh. Now, this is where the verse talks about يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان. And then here, وَلَهُلْ, and for him, jawari, the ships, al-munsha'atu, elevated, fil bahri, in the sea, kal a'lam, like mountains. So now what we're seeing over here, and this is the plural of alam. So what we're seeing is, he's saying there are many alam, there are many banners in here. Because they are elevated above the ocean, we translated this as ships. Here it says ships in the translation. And when you look over here, it says munsha'at, elevated. So what is elevated? Because when we look at the ocean, we say, well, what's elevated is the ships. So what we're saying is that, well, if it is the ocean, then it's ships. But what if that nur, what if that samandar is nur? It is a Bahrain, an ocean of nur. And therefore, and from this comes Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. So you see, you are describing now Maraj al-Bahrain yaltaqiyan, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Bibi Zahra salamullah alayha. And now you're saying Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein. Then you say al-munsha'atu fil bahri kal a'lam. There are also there now, after these two, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, 9 alams who are the offspring of Imam Hussein. 9 descendants of Imam Hussein who are the Imams. They are the ones who are elevated. This is not my tafsir. In Tafsir al-Burhan, Sayyid Hashim Hussain Bahrani has quoted Imam Muhammad al-Baqir salatu wassalamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, as having talked about this. So it's not, you know, I'm just, again, just trying to praise my favorite team. No, this is what has been said. And therefore, when we're looking at these elevated emblems of light, and we come back over here, we see that fixed for them bright minarets as signs of his oneness. So that Bahrain, and therefore, and the children of Bibi Zahra, the father of Bibi Zahra, the husband, these are the bright minarets that are signs of his oneness. And therefore, it's important to see they are 14, but they become Wahid. And when they become Wahid, we realize that they can be 1 and 14. They are the Nuri Wahid who can separate into 14, but he is Ahad. So to look at indivisibility and to say, what does it mean to be indivisible? We need to look at divisibility. And that's why everything in the universe is divisible. Every structure is divided into molecules, is divided into atoms, is divided into nuclei and orbits, is divided into protons and neutrons, electrons, is divided into quarks, is divided on and on. If our instruments were there, we would keep on dividing. And so therefore, he is indivisible. So we can see the opposite. And by that we know the weights of sins do not burden them. So the weight of sin is burdening us, not you, I mean, myself. And the weight of sin burdening people like myself, therefore, is something that is a problem of our time. I was very surprised, talking to some psychiatrists in the US. And these psychiatrists were saying that the suicide rate in the Muslim community is rising. And the suicide rate is rising. Interestingly, there's a narration from Imam Jafar as-Sadiq salatu wassalamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, regarding, and he was asked about, you know, how a woman can die. And, you know, there was some woman at that time who had died through a lot of sickness. One woman died from an accident. And, you know, so the question was asked, like, is it possible for a woman to die with so much sickness and ill health and pain? Or is it possible for a woman to die in this manner where they just accidentally, suddenly they die? And, you know, I mean, we have Hirz-e-Jawad to protect us from accidental death. That's true. So in a sense, because of that, we start to think that accidental death is something that doesn't happen to us. But the narration goes on to say that a woman can die from any type of death except for one. And what is that death? Suicide. Does not die from suicide. But suicide is right. Why? Because suicide is an indication of loss of hope. Suicide occurs when we lose hope. That means that, I mean, a person can go through various changes in their life, and iman can become more or less. I am not judging anybody. And I do not know, when someone goes through the despair of suicide, what happens at the last moments. And it's the last moments that count. So not to be conclusive and not to judge, but just to say that the actual effect of or the cause of suicide is a sense of despair. And I mean, one can, it's a very tough situation. So I don't want to be, you know, insensitive and judgmental in any way. I understand depression and despair, and I understand that the pain can be such that one wants to just end it, and whatever way is possible. But understand that it comes also with a sense of despair. It comes with a sense of loss of hope. And that loss of hope is an indication that we have given up on Allah. And that is very, very, you know, that is very powerful. That's something that we want to avoid completely. So the idea of sins, and why am I saying this? I'm saying this because those group of psychiatrists were saying that the reason why the suicide rate they see is rising, in because they are talking to those people as patients. They are discussing with them. They see their inner mechanism, and then they see the sad, tragic ending, and they're connecting the dots. And they are basically saying, that zina, this is what they said. So, you know, I mean, one could take it from a, you know, if it was a religious person saying it, then it would be different. Oh, because you are sinners and you are adulterers, this is happening. But what they said was that in our experience, it was the guilt from zina. That means that they are young Muslim youth who are in a society where adultery is promoted, and refraining from adultery is actually looked upon negatively. That means if you refrain from adultery, you are a young person who is, you know, just so, so the loser. I don't know what else to say. You're a loser if you are, you know, in the lingo of the new generation. They probably have better words for it now. I'm old, but whatever they call it, you know, you're just a loser. You don't what? Nobody likes you. What's going on? They promote it. But the point is that now they're saying that these youth, what's happening to them is they want to acclimatize and establish their status in the society. And our status in this society is established by our sex appeal, by the amount of people that are attracted to us, by the amount of people that are willing to spend physical contact with us in adultery. This is what's determining our value. So in that value system, Allah's value is opposite. Allah gives value to those who refrain from this. Society is giving value to those who dive into this. But what happens now is you have these young ones, and this is not a universal, you know, statement. I'm not saying for everybody or majority. I don't know the numbers, but what I'm saying is that I heard this from professionals who have observed and have seen that the weight of the sin upon them causes such guilt. And it probably is not one factor, but there may be other factors as well, but it's a burden. So the weight of sin is burdening us. And that is why sin is the most harmful to us. We burden ourselves, literally. You know, it is basically like, you know, I can overeat and gain extra weight and cause problems for my physical health. And therefore my spiritual health is burdened by these constant little sins, and they add up. Or big ones like zina, gunah, kabira. But even the little ones will add up. And the rotation of nights and days does not make them move. Their haraka is not based upon the rotation of nights and days. This is where we give them the metaphysical status now. Entropy and the laws of the universe are such that everybody is going to break down. These are the laws of entropy. And so therefore, when we're looking at the angels, they don't follow those laws of entropy. So that tells you that they are above time and space. That tells you that the rotation of nights and days would not affect us as well, but in that metaphysical realm, in that spiritual realm. Doubts do not attack with arrows the firmness of their faith. Misgivings do not assault the bases of their beliefs and the spark of malice. And pardon me. The spark of malice does not ignite among them. Amazement does not tarnish what knowledge of him their hearts possess, or his greatness and awe of his glory that resides in their bosoms. So therefore, amazement does not tarnish what knowledge of him their hearts possess. Amazement, hayrat, shock and awe. Amazement is something that occurs when we observe something that is beyond what we have ever observed. Our perception of reality based upon our observations and senses gives us an idea of what can be and what cannot be. And it is limited. And when that limitation is broken, we are amazed. Ye kaise ho sakta hai? Ye kya ho gaya? And we call that a mu'jiza. And when we see it amongst the Masumin, the miracle, therefore, and that's what happened with Nusair. Nusair, the one after whom Nusairis are named, and one of the most famous labels used among Shias now, along with Maulai and Nusairi and Muqassir and all these labels that we like to go around giving people. Maybe Facebook should have little, emojis for that as well. Before Facebook only had emojis for like, and then it got emojis for like and love and sad and this and what. Why not have little emojis for the labels we like to give to different people? Because it seems like that's what we do. We have our idea, and now we want to listen to somebody else. We've become less tolerant to anybody who's saying anything different, and we immediately want to label. And that is where we limit ourselves, because when we label other people and when we are limiting ourselves, we are putting a limit on our perception. And what happens then is when something amazing occurs, we get confused and we don't know what to do, and we start labeling and we start thinking, how is this possible? How can Amirul Mu'minin do this? This is what Allah does. How can this happen? How can that happen? And so, shock and awe can lead to doubt as well. And so that's what happens. We hear fazail, we hear, and the malang as well. Yes, Abbas Bhai. And so free of Shariat, I like that, and yeah, I think that we have steps that we evolve through. And as we evolve through steps, what happens is we reach a point where, Sharia becomes so much a part of our being that we are free from it, in the sense that we become one with the Sharia. Now what happens is when we obey the Sharia to the point where we are 100% doing it, then we are a true malang. Because a malang is, somebody who is naturally just always in connection. And that means that we're naturally always obeying the laws. But what happens is, ishq and hubb and mawadda and, these statuses, and the malang is something that also applies to that. Absolutely. Just 1 minute left. My eye is on the watch, and I believe 12:35. So I think that, they try to miss those steps and go on to become that state. That's like trying to practice a profession without going through school and college and university. I mean, of course, ishq is there, and ishq to har koi chahta hi hai, aur ishq ki manzil waqin समझना मुश्किल है. और अमीरुल मोमिनीन ने फरमाया कि मलाइका के पास तो पर भी होते हैं. और जब हमने कहा कि इंसान जो है वो फरिश्तों से अफजल भी हो सकता है, तो हमने देखा कि वो इंसान, और इसकी मिसाल भी हमें मिली, और 2 मिसालें मिली हमें, और उन दोनों मिसालों में हमने देखा कि वो 2 हस्तियां ऐसी थीं कि उनको पर मिल गए, और पर मिलने का मतलब फरिश्ते से अफजल. और पर किस तरह से मिले? इस तरह से मिले कि मैदान जंग में, देखिए, जब तक लड़ना, जब तक ज़िरा ना टूट जाए, जब तक जख्म ना लग जाए, हथियार खत्म हो जाए और बात है. जंग में लड़ना जब तक के बाजू ना रहे, ये एक अलग मकाम है, और ये मकाम फना का मकाम है, और ये इश्क का मकाम है. और या तो हजरत जाफर तैयार ने करके दिखाया, या अब्बास इब्न अली ने करके दिखाया. वो अब्बास इब्न अली कि इसका اس کی مشاہدہ بی بی سکینہ خود اپنے بابا کے ساتھ کھڑی ہوئی خیمے کے سامنے کہہ رہی ہیں کہ اے بابا اب مجھے نظر آ رہا ہے کہ علم آ رہا ہے، علم آ رہا ہے، لیکن ایک وقت آیا کہ نظر سے اوجل ہو گیا، بی بی سکینہ کی نظروں سے علم۔ اس وقت بی بی نے اپنے بابا سے پوچھا کہ بابا اب مجھے چچا کا علم نظر نہیں آتا۔ یہ وہ وقت تھا کہ علی کے شیر، حسین کے شیر کا ایک بازو قلم ہو گیا تھا، لیکن بازو کی پرواہ نہ کی، پرواہ بس علم کی تھی۔ یہ حسین کا علم ہے، علم کو نہیں گرنا چاہیے۔ بازو گر جائے عباس کا، کہا کہ اس کے بعد دوسرا بازو بھی کٹ گیا تھا۔ یہ عباس کے بازو ہیں، یہ وہ بازو نہیں ہے جو ایک وار میں کٹ جائیں۔ نہ جانے کتنے وار مارے تھے حسین کے شیر کے بازو کو، شریکت الحسین کے نقاب کو کتنے وار لگے تھے کہ جس کے بعد ایک بازو قلم ہوا کہ پھر بی بی سکینہ نے کہا کہ اب مجھے علم نظر آ رہا ہے، لیکن ایک وقت اور آیا کہ دوسرا بازو بھی قلم ہو گیا۔ سلام اس علی کے شیر کو کہ دونوں بازو قلم ہو گئے تھے لیکن علم اپنی جگہ سے نہیں ہٹا تھا۔ یہ وہ علم ہے، کس کا علم ہے؟ یہ وہی تو علم ہے جو حسین کا ہے، اور حسین کا علم وہی ہے جس کو قرآن نے اعلام کہا ہے، وہ منشآت فی البحر کالأعلام فسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين۔ اللهم صل على محمد۔
جزاک اللہ مولانا،
جزاک اللہ
مولا آپ کو سلامت رکھے اور آپ کے خاندان والوں کو۔ ہم جو ہے یہ یونس آپ ذرا لسٹ تو بول دیجئے جو مرحومین کے لیے۔ یونس ٹھیک ہے، یہ جو ہے آپ کے آج کے ویسے پورے پارٹیسپینٹس کے مرحومین کے لیے، اور سید محمد عسکری جعفری جو پھر سے ریمائنڈ کر رہے ہیں کہ نہج البلاغہ کا ٹرانسلیشن کیے تھے آج سے 1960s میں، اور ہمارے کزن سید مصطفیٰ علی موسی کے لیے ایک سورہ فاتحہ، اور مرحومین کے پارٹیسپینٹس اور مولانا کی والدہ کا انتقال ہوا ہے، ان کے نسیم رضوی if I am right، ان کے لیے بھی جو ہے
ناہدہ رضوی۔
جی جزاک اللہ۔ ناہید انجم بنت سید ناصر حسین نقوی۔
جی بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، الحمدللہ رب العالمین الرحمن اب ہم چند منٹ دیں گے مولانا کو پرسہ دینے کے لیے، جو بھی اگر بہت ہی مختصر اس میں پرسہ دینا چاہ رہے ہیں، اور اس سے پہلے جو ہے ہم اسپانسرز کو انکریج کر رہے ہیں وہ آ کے یہ ہمارا سلسلہ الحمدللہ کلوز ٹو 20 پارٹیسپینٹس، اور یوٹیوب پہ بھی کافی آئے، اور یہ پورے ہر جگہ سے لوگ سنتے ہیں، پوری دنیا سے، حیدرآباد سے، بمبئی سے اور دبئی سے۔ تو مولانا کا میسج یونیورسل جا رہا ہے، اور آج نہیں وہ بعد میں بھی جا کے سنتے ہیں، اور اس کو مارکیٹ بھی کریں، اور لوگوں کو جو ہے انکریج کریں کہ یہ نئے نئے چیزیں سیکھیں۔ اور ہمارا نالج سیکرز کا یہ فرض ہے کہ یہ ایک کتاب اور پیپر اور پنسل لیں اور پوائنٹس کو نوٹ کریں اور ریپیٹ کرتے جائیں، اور اس کے چھوٹے نوٹس بنائیں ہر سیشن کے۔ تو پلیز اگر آپ لوگ مولانا آپ کی والدہ کے میں بریل میں بھی تھا اور نماز میں بھی تھا، تو ہم سب کی طرف سے آپ کو جو ہے ان کی ایصال ثواب کے لیے منلز بھی کرے تھے، اور انشاءاللہ دوسرے لوگ بھی اگر مولانا کو پرسہ دینا چاہ رہے ہیں تو پلیز۔
بے شک ماں کا جدا ہونا ایک بیٹے کے لیے بہت ہی سخت ترین منزل ہے، اور ہم اس درد کو جانتے ہیں کہ ہم نے بھی اپنی ماں کھوئی ہے، اور دوسری جو چیز ہے وہ دوری ہے. میرے لیے دوری بھی تھی. مجھے علم نہیں ہے کہ مولانا کی والدہ محترمہ ساتھ میں تھیں، قریب تھیں.
جی ساتھ ہی رہتی تھی.
ماشاء اللہ، اللہ کو اس کا بہت ثواب دیا ہے. آپ نے بہت خدمات کی ہیں، اور اس کی جزا اس کے سوا کچھ نہیں کہ صرف اور صرف جنت ہے اس کی. اور آپ نے جو خدمات کی ہوں گی اپنی ماں کی، آپ بہت خوش قسمت، آپ قریب تھے. اور جو لوگ جو دور رہتے تھے، میں بدقسمتی سے یہاں تھا جب والدہ کا انتقال حیدرآباد ہندوستان میں ہوا، اور وہ تڑپ یاد دلاتی ہے کئی مرتبہ. بہرحال پرسا تو کوئی دے ہی نہیں سکتا اس غم کا، یہ گارنٹیڈ ہے. وہ رشتہ بیٹے کا ماں کا، بس اللہ کا شکر یہ ہے کہ ہمارے لیے ایک در ہے، در کربلا، کہ ہم اپنے ہر غم کو اس دریا میں سمو کر ایک تسکین کی منزل تک پہنچ سکتے ہیں. یہ ایک بڑا ہمارے لیے اللہ نے ایک ذریعہ بنایا ہے. اور اگر یہ نہ ہوتا تو شاید نہیں معلوم خودکشی کے ریٹ اور کیا ہو جاتے انسان میں. انسان کتنا، جب حضرت موسیٰ واپس جا رہے تھے تدفین سے اپنی ماں کی، حکم ہوا سنبھل کے، موسیٰ وہ نہیں رہی جو تمہارے حق میں دعا کرتی تھی.
اللہ
اکبر. اللہ جوار رحمت میں جگہ اعلیٰ ترین عطا فرما.
الہی
تو پہلے 14 معصومین علیہ الصلوۃ والسلام.
السلام علیکم مولانا، آپ کو تعزیت اور مرحومہ مغفورہ کی درجات عالی میں اور اضافہ فرمائیں، اور آپ کی جو بھی خدمات اسلام کے لیے ہے وہ یقیناً آپ کے ماں باپ کو اس کا ثواب پہنچتے رہیں گا. ماں کی دعا جنت کی ہوا بولتے ہیں. تو جو ہم لوگ دور ہیں ہمارے ماں باپ کے قبور سے، وہ خود ہمارے لیے کافی ڈیفیکلٹی ہوتی ہے. تو اللہ آپ کو کم از کم وہی شہر میں رکھا ہے تاکہ آپ جب چاہے جا کے ان کے پاس اللہ کی طرف سے ان کے توسل سے آپ کی دعا قبول ہوں گے انشاءاللہ. ہم ضرور ان کو یاد کریں گے اپنے سورہ فاتحہ میں. اللہ آپ کو تعزیت دے. جیسا قمر بھائی بولے، this is a loss that cannot be explained and cannot be ever condolences. Yeah. شکریہ.
یہ تھے ڈاکٹر فضل علی جعفری جو ہیوسٹن میں وہاں سے اٹینڈ کریں. جزاک اللہ.
بہت مشکور آپ کے الفاظ کا. واقعی بس یہی ہے، میں تو یہی دیکھتا ہوں کہ ہمارے یہاں جو گریف کاؤنسلنگ ہوتی ہے، کیونکہ واقعی وہ تو یہ ایسی چیزیں ہیں کہ تیار نہیں ہو سکتے ان کے لیے، اور ہم تو وہ قوم ہے کہ ہر وقت غم میں ہی رہتے ہیں امام حسین کے، اور ہمیں احساس ہے غم کا، اور ہم غم سے بہت قریب قوم ہے. لیکن جو احساس ہوتا ہے نا لاس کا، وہ واقعاً جب تک کہ محسوس نہ ہو اس کو سمجھنا مشکل ہے. اور ہم مصائب پہ روتے بھی ہیں، لیکن وہ جو ایک احساس محرومیت ہے وہ الگ ہے. اور واقعاً اگر اللہ چاہتا تو ہمیں یہ تکلیف نہ دیتا، لیکن اس تکلیف کے ذریعے سے ہمیں پتہ چلتا ہے کہ یہ دنیا ہے ہی فنا ہونے کے لیے، اور یہاں پہ کچھ باقی نہیں رہے گا، اور ساری اچھی چیزیں وہاں پہ ہیں، اور اللہ اچھی چیزیں اپنے پاس واپس بلا لیتا ہے، اور ہم وہیں سے آئے ہیں، وہیں پہ جانا ہے، اور ہم کہہ دیتے ہیں انا للہ و انا الیہ راجعون، جیسے کہ یہ ایک سیڈ سٹیٹمنٹ ہے جو کہ بس ہم کہہ کے رو لیتے ہیں، لیکن اصل میں یہ تو کانسولیشن ہے. انا للہ و انا الیہ راجعون اتنی یہ تو خوشخبری ہے جسے کہنا چاہیے کہ دل جو ہے سکون میں آ جائے کہ ہم وہیں سے تو آ رہے ہیں اور وہیں تو واپس جانا ہے، وہی تو گھر ہے. تو انسان گھر کو جب لوٹتا ہے تو سکون ہی پاتا ہے. تو کچھ لوگ پہلے چلے جاتے ہیں اپنے گھر کو، کچھ لوگ بعد میں جاتے ہیں، لیکن ہماری تمنا بڑھ جاتی ہے وہاں جانے کی جب ہمیں احساس محرومیت ہوتی ہے. تو واقعاً یہ وہ لوگ ہیں جو ہم سے جب جدا ہوتے ہیں تو ہمارا ایسا لگتا ہے کہ جسم کا ایک ٹکڑا جو ہے الگ ہو گیا، اب ہم وہ نہیں رہے، اور نہ دنیا ہمارے لیے وہ رہی، اور نہ ہی ہم کسی چیز کو دیکھتے ہیں تو ہمیں وہ لطف آتا ہے. تو واقعاً بس یہ ایک امپورٹنٹ لیسنز ہیں، اور واقعی کبھی ہم وہ خدمت تو پوری کر ہی نہیں سکتے. اور امام نے کہا کہ تم اپنی ماں کے لیے جو بھی کرو گے یاد رکھنا کہ تمہاری ماں نے جو تمہارے لیے کیا تھا وہ اس میں ماں نے پہل کی تھی، کچھ کسی وجہ سے نہیں کیا تھا ماں نے جو بھی تمہارے لیے کیا تھا، لیکن تم جو کر رہے ہو اب اس وجہ سے کر رہے ہو کہ جو تمہاری ماں تمہارے ساتھ کر چکی ہے. تو کبھی بھی سبقت تو کسی بھی اعتبار سے حاصل نہیں ہو سکتی، لیکن بس یہ ہے کہ ہمارا جو مذہب ہے، میں نے دیکھا کہ اس میں جو ہماری مجالس ہیں، پھر بعد میں ہم ایک دوسرے سے گلے مل کے روتے ہیں، یہ بڑی گریف کاؤنسلنگ ہے اس میں واقعہ. اور دوسرے مذاہب کے لوگ جو ہیں وہ ساری زندگی اس کو سمجھ نہیں پاتے ہیں، اس غم کو اسے ڈیل نہیں کر پاتے ہیں. ہم لوگ تو سویم پہ گریف کاؤنسلنگ کرتے ہیں. ابھی کل ہی چہلم کی مجلس تھی ماں کی، 100-200 لوگوں سے گلے مل کے رویا ہوں اور دل ہلکا کیا ہے. تو بس مولا کا لاکھ لاکھ شکر ہے کہ ہمیں یہ درد دیا اور ہمیں کربلا دی کہ جس کے ذریعے سے ہم ان غموں کو پھر بھی کسی نہ کسی حد تک سہ کے آگے بڑھتے ہیں، اپنے مقصد کو پورا کرتے ہیں. آپ کا بے حد مشکور ہوں.
اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد.
بار الہ جو لوگ تھے جنہیں شکرت فرمائی ان سب کے اوپر اپنی رحمت نازل فرما. جن کے والدین نہیں ہیں اب توفیق دے ہمیں کہ ہم ان تک ثواب ایصال کر سکیں، اور حق تو ادا نہیں ہو سکتا لیکن کم از کم کوشش کر سکیں. جن کے والدین حیات ہیں ان کے سائے کو ہمارے سروں پہ قائم و دائم رکھنا فرما. بار الہ جو مشکلات میں ان کی مشکلات کو دور فرما. جن کی بیماریاں ہیں، سرجریز ہیں، ٹریٹمنٹ چل رہی ہے، جن کے ریسپریٹوری ابھی تک ہمارا وبا پھیلی ہوئی ہے، جو جس لحاظ سے بیمار ہیں، بیمار کربلا کے صدقے میں، بیمار کربلا کی دادی بحق فاطمہ و بیہا و بعلیہا و بنیہا کے صدقے میں شفایابی عطا فرما. جو بے روزگار ہیں ان کو رزق حلال عطا فرما. جن نوجوانوں کی شادیاں نہیں ہوئی ہیں ان کو طیب و طاہر پارٹنرز عطا فرما. بار الہ ہمیں توفیق دے کہ ہم تیرے دین کو سمجھ سکیں، کہ ہم تیرے حجتوں کے رستے پہ چل سکیں، کہ ہم اپنے امام کے انتظار میں تیرے ساتھ جس طرح تو چاہتا ہے اس طرح سے اپنے امام کا ہم انتظار کریں، تاکہ جب امام آئیں تو اگر ہم زندہ نہ ہو تو قبروں سے نکلتے ہوئے ایک ہاتھ میں تلوار ایک ہاتھ میں نیزہ، لبیک یا امام لبیک یا امام کہتے ہوئے آگے بڑھیں. اللہم صلی علی محمد محمد.
مولانا اما یجیبو بسم اللہ.
اور آپ سے گزارش ہے کہ 5 دفعہ اما یجیبو کی تلاوت کر کے امام صدقے میں سب کو شفا یابی ہو، کیونکہ یہی اصل مستحق ہیں اما یجیبو کے. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. اما یجیب المضطر اذا دعاء ویکشف السوء. 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 اما یجیب المضطر اذا دعاء ويكشف السوء. يا أرحم الراحمين بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد.
مولانا بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. السلام علیکم.
وعلیکم السلام حسین صاحب.
جی آپ جو जिक्र किए मौलाना in the end about adultery and infidelity. Unfortunately, it is not just restricted to teens anymore, Maulana. I have personally seen where even adults who seemingly are religious and have been attending sessions and reading namaz, Quran, ziyarat, Hajj, they have also, they are also falling into this trap. And unfortunately, in our city, it's becoming quite common actually. So I know that discussing these topics also is a taboo. You don't want to. It's like the big elephant. We don't want to recognize in the room. So I don't know if it will be appropriate for some forums where we bring these things out in the open and try to discuss, because you're absolutely right about suicides. We don't know the causes, but it's quite possible that they may be associated with what you identify. So I know that this is not the forum to bring it up, but perhaps at some point, for the fathers and the grandfathers that are there in this group, it will help in terms of dealing with when you're put in these kinds of situations in your own personal life.
Absolutely, Hussain Saab, Jazakallah khair, and thank you for bringing that up. That really was not it wasn't really in my realm of thought. I wasn't, I suppose it's something that one would not be surprised about, but you're right. We tend to target teenagers for this because puberty and hormones are, new, and so it's a little harder, but indeed, absolutely. And it's a universal problem. I think it's something that we all guard ourselves against. We all have to be careful about. So thank you for that excellent suggestion. And that's something that you're absolutely right. It needs to be brought up more. And it's not something that's really mentioned now. Now, as you say, now that I think about it, I've never really mentioned it in any majalis, nor do I hear it, but it's one of the original tests. It's one of the original things and original commands. And it's something that is one of our main battles that we have to control ourselves against. So absolutely, inshallah, it's something that we need to open up more, and it's becoming more rampant. It's an epidemic, you're right. And it's something that we can survive. We can overcome it. We can control ourselves. We can move on, even if we have fallen, from grace and gone through that sin. It's still something we can rise above, but it needs to be put out there, and it needs to be motivated so that people realize this is not the way to go about fulfilling our desires. Inshallah.
My suggestion, Hussain, is Hussain Jafri. ये मुस्लिम कांग्रेस होते हैं और ये बड़े बड़े जो जगह हैं उस पे भी जो है जहाँ काफी लोग आके अटेंड करते हैं, तो उसके लिए भी जो है अगर ऐसा उसमें सेशन करे तो मौलाना भी आ सकते हैं। टोरंटो में रहते हैं वो, डिट्रॉइट में ज्यादा दूर नहीं है जो नेक्स्ट सेशन होने वाला है, तो देखिए आप सजेस्ट करिए इंतजामिया।
Because of course teenagers are teenagers, but the thing is when adults and small children are engaged in these kinds of activities, then it sends a very wrong message to the young children that the person who are committing may actually have, and they get the wrong values. So it becomes like an intergenerational kinds of problems if it is not handled at the right time. तो बस अल्लाह, बस मैं वही सोच रहा था कि कोई ना कोई मौके से अगर हम इसके ऊपर भी अगर गुफ्तगू करना शुरू किए तो
बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट है। आप ये बड़े सेशंस में एक वर्कशॉप करिए, इसके लिए मैं मौलाना से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा वो भी आके आपके जो है एक वर्कशॉप कर सकते हैं इंशाल्लाह। So inshallah we'll see you next Sunday, and thanks for the participants, and thanks Yunus, you're on Tobomari, a very nice and scenic place, and still have time to participate in this session and be a host. Jazakallah. Iltama se dua.
Jazakallah. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
और आप ज़ियारत पढ़ा दीजिए इंशाल्लाह.
متوجه زيارة. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك وعلى جدك وأبيك، السلام عليك وعلى أمك وأختك وأخيك، السلام عليك وعلى الأئمة المعصومين من ذريتك وبنيك، السلام عليك وعلى عليين الشهيدين وأخيك أبو الفضل العباس والمستشهدين بين يديك، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى أختك وبكفر الشام أم المصائب زينب التقية، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى أمك وعلى أختك أم الكلثوم المرزية، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى بنتك سكينة جد مبينة مظلومة، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى بناتي هاشمية أصيلان كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس أنيس النفوس أيها المدفون بأرض توس، السلام عليك وعلى ضائك السبعة وابنائك الأربعة وأختك معصومة القم يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى الرضا رازق القدر والقضاء ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان من فتنة الزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا مظهر الإيمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، سيدي عجل الله تعالى فرجك وساق الله مخرجك وزهورك وجعل من أنصارك وأعوانك ورحمة الله وبركاته، اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.